They approached with calculated intentions to leave you shattered. What they didn't anticipate was your quiet power and unwavering self-worth. In a stunning reversal, it was their heart that crumbled while yours remained intact, leaving them, confronting truths they'd been avoiding. Now they're experiencing a profound awakening, forever changed by the person they foolishly underestimated. The universe conspires in mysterious ways, and tonight, right now, you stand at the precipice of a cosmic revelation. Before you even knew their name, they had marked you, selected you, targeted you with surgical precision from across a crowded room. Those eyes locked onto yours, calculating every vulnerable crack in your armor, every soft spot they could later exploit. Make no mistake, you were chosen. Not randomly, not accidentally, but deliberately, as their next conquest in a long, sordid history of emotional carnage. Their elegant fingers reached for you like a spider approaching its next meal, already salivating at the thought of your inevitable downfall. They studied you, watched how you moved through the world with that open heart, that genuine smile. And in their twisted mind they thought, perfect, another one who still believes in love, another fool to add to my collection. Oh, how their lips curled in anticipation. They had done this dance so many times before, the practiced words, the calculated touch, the perfectly timed vulnerability. Their blueprint for destruction was flawless. Their strategy for dismantling your self-worth was already drafted before you even spoke your first word to them. They had prepared the mask so carefully, crafted to fit exactly what you were searching for. The perfect reflection of your deepest desires, your most sacred dreams. A mirage designed to lure you into the desert of their emptiness until you were parched and begging for a drop of their affection. But what they never saw coming, what blindsided them completely, was that you were not like the others. You were carrying ancient wisdom they couldn't detect. You possessed a power they had never encountered before. They thought they were the hunter and you were the prey. They believed you would crumble like a house of cards at the first sign of their withdrawal. They expected you to become another, notch on their belt, another broken soul left wondering what went wrong. But the cosmic joke was on them, because while they were plotting your emotional execution, the universe was orchestrating their awakening, with you as the catalyst, the divine hammer that would shatter their illusions forever. Make no mistake about what you were dealing with. This wasn't some amateur attempting manipulation for the first time. This was a master of the dark arts of emotional predation, a virtuoso of psychological warfare who had spent years perfecting their craft. Their approach was nothing short of brilliant in its calculated precision. The way they studied their targets, your specific love language, your unique wounds, your particular insecurities, before making their move. Nothing was accidental. Every text, every compliment, every spontaneous encounter, all meticulously orchestrated to disarm your defenses. Watch how they operate. First comes the mirroring phase. Suddenly, as if by magic, they share all your interests, your passions, your dreams. You love obscure French cinema. What a coincidence. They've been obsessed with it since childhood. You mention a rare book. They've not only read it, but have profound insights that resonate exactly with yours. The statistical improbability of such perfect alignment never registers because they've already begun rewiring your brain with dopamine, hits of validation. Next comes the love bombing, that overwhelming cascade of attention that makes you feel like the center of the universe. Late-night conversations that stretch until dawn, messages that flood your phone from morning until night. Grandiose declarations of connection that seem too good to be true, because they are. Never met anyone like you before. Feel like we've known each other in past lives. Can't believe how perfectly we understand each other. Words designed to create a false sense of destiny. Then the strategic vulnerability, those carefully selected confessions that make you believe you're seeing their authentic self. The childhood trauma they've never shared with anyone else. The tearful revelation of past heartbreaks that position them as the wounded one. The one needing your healing touch, all while obscuring the trail of shattered hearts they've left behind. And oh, their past. If only their previous victims could form a council, what tales they would tell. The identical patterns played out with mechanical precision, the same sweet nothings whispered in different ears, the same promises made and broken with cold efficiency. The same discard phase executed without remorse once they'd extracted what they needed. Adoration, validation, emotional energy drained like vampiric sustenance. Their karma accumulated like dark matter, dense, invisible, but exerting gravitational force on everything in their orbit. Yet they remained blind to it, floating through life believing themselves untouchable. Each broken heart left behind only strengthened their conviction of superiority, their belief that emotional consequences were for lesser beings. For years, decades even, this cycle continued uninterrupted, their cosmic debt growing exponentially with each person destroyed, each trust violated, each sacred connection profaned for sport. They operated with the impunity of someone who believed the universal laws of reciprocity simply didn't apply to them, until they met you. From the very first moment, something was different. An electric current of recognition shot through your spine when they approached. While your conscious mind might have been captivated by their charm, something ancient stirred in your cellular memory, a primal warning system activated by the predator in your midst. Your intuition screamed while they smiled. Your soul recoiled while they spoke those honeyed words. That voice inside you, the one you had ignored in past relationships, suddenly grew thunderous, impossible to dismiss. Danger, it whispered with each of their calculated compliments. Lies, it murmured, when they shared their supposedly exclusive vulnerabilities. They deployed their usual arsenal, the lingering touches, the intense eye contact designed to create false intimacy, the strategic compliments targeting your deepest insecurities. But instead of melting, you felt yourself growing stronger. Instead of being hypnotized by their performance, you found yourself observing it with strange detachment, as if watching an actor whose techniques you could suddenly see through. When they called, something made you hesitate before answering. When they texted, you felt no urgency to respond. When they escalated their pursuit, as they always did when sensing resistance, you felt not flattered, but suffocated. Their intensity, which had trapped so many before you, only pushed you further away. Then came the moment that changed everything. Perhaps it was a slip in their performance, a recycled line you'd heard before, an anecdote that contradicted an earlier story, or simply that flash of calculation you caught in their eyes when they thought you weren't looking. Whatever the trigger, the veil dropped completely, and you did what no one had ever done before. You walked away, cleanly, completely, without explanation. You blocked their number, declined their invitations, removed yourself from spaces where they might accidentally encounter you. When mutual friends mentioned their name, you changed the subject with casual indifference. When they sent messages through others, you received them with polite disinterest. Each of your boundaries was a brick in an impenetrable wall they could neither climb nor circumvent. Each of your rejections was a mirror forcing them to see their true reflection, not the grandiose image they'd constructed. Each of your silences was a sermon louder than any accusation could have been. You saw through their facade, not just to their manipulation, but to the wounded child beneath the master manipulator. You recognized the emptiness they were desperately trying to fill with external validation. You perceived the terror driving their need to control, and in that recognition, without even knowing it, you began dismantling the very foundation of their false identity. What happened next was nothing short of cosmic justice manifesting through your actions. Your rejection wasn't just another door closing in their face, it was a seismic rupture in the very fabric of their reality. Never before had they encountered such impenetrable immunity to their charms. Never had they felt so utterly powerless to affect someone's perception. Never had they been so completely seen through their disguises, their tactics, their carefully crafted persona. The universe had finally sent them an opponent they couldn't defeat, couldn't seduce, couldn't manipulate, and this realization hit them with the force of a celestial hammer, shattering the brittle crystal of their ego into 1,000 glittering fragments. And as their ego thrashed in its death throes, as their carefully constructed self-image disintegrated, something long dormant began to stir beneath the rubble. The first fragile shoots of authentic self-awareness pushing through the cracks of their shattered identity. The desperation that followed was magnificent in its intensity. Like a drowning person clutching at water, they grasped for any connection to you. Any way to reinsert themselves into your consciousness, any method to reclaim their position of influence. First came the barrage of attempts at direct contact, messages that oscillated wildly between self-pitying vulnerability and thinly veiled hostility. Just checking in texts at 2 a.m., emails dissecting what went wrong between you, voicemails that started casual and ended in raw emotional outbursts. Each one met with your silence, a silence that echoed in their mind like a scream. When direct approaches failed, they turned to surveillance. Your social media became their obsession. Each post scrutinized for hidden meanings, each photo analyzed for clues about your emotional state. Are you happy without them? Suffering? With someone new? The questions consumed them like a fever. They began appearing in places they knew you frequented. The coffee shop you mentioned once in passing, the bookstore you tagged in a post months ago, the park near your apartment. Each coincidental encounter carefully planned to seem spontaneous. Each interaction designed to re-establish their relevance in your universe. They reached out to mutual connections, fishing for information about you, disguising their desperate curiosity as casual interest. Oh, how is your friend doing? Just wondering. Their questions becoming more specific, more urgent, more transparent in their true purpose with each conversation. They studied your new interests, your new connections, attempting to reshape themselves again into what they thought you wanted, not understanding that what repelled you was this very chameleon-like quality, this absence of authentic self. But beneath this frantic activity lay the truth they couldn't face. You had triggered an awakening they weren't prepared for. Their pursuit of you wasn't just about wounded pride or lost control. It was about the terrifying void you had exposed within them. The emptiness they had been running from their entire life, filling with the emotional energy of others, was now staring back at them, demanding to be acknowledged. When all attempts at reconnection failed, when every manipulative tactic met with your impenetrable wall of indifference, they resorted to the final weapon in their arsenal, the smear campaign. The desperate attempt to control the narrative they could no longer influence directly. Like a master storyteller spinning fiction, they began crafting a new version of events. In this revised history, you were the manipulator. You were the unstable one. You were the heartless player who used and discarded them. The audacity of this reversal would have been laughable if it weren't executed with such conviction. They shared carefully edited snippets of your interactions, stripped of all context. They exaggerated minor disagreements into major conflicts. They transformed their pursuit of you into your pursuit of them. They cast themselves as the vulnerable victim who narrowly escaped your toxic influence. To mutual friends, they spoke with performative sadness about how they still care about you, despite how you treated them. To new acquaintances, they referenced you as a cautionary tale of someone who can't handle real intimacy. To potential romantic partners, they mentioned you as the crazy ex who couldn't let go, never mentioning their own desperate attempts to maintain connection. The narrative spread through social circles like a virus, designed to accomplish multiple objectives simultaneously: to salvage their damaged reputation, to preemptively discredit anything you might say about them, and most importantly, to provoke a response from you. Any response that would break your silence and re-engage your energy. But what they failed to realize was that with each elaborate lie, each distortion, each performance of victimhood, they were only digging themselves deeper into the very inauthenticity that had repelled you in the first place. Each fabrication widened the gap between their presented self and their true self, making genuine connection increasingly impossible. And through it all, you maintained your power through distance and silence. You recognized that engaging with their narrative would only feed the very dynamic you had escaped. You understood intuitively what they had yet to learn, that your validation, your attention, even your anger was the energy source they desperately needed to sustain their false self. Look, you already know the game is rigged, and if you're paying attention, you know the walls are closing in. So let's talk about what we're doing about it. When you live by the day at the market's command, where profit and property rule the land, to be heard, to be held, to be dealt a fair hand, these are the things that a people demand, and we hear you. The Obsidian Inner Order has paywalls, yes. Those who stand with us, who fuel this mission, they give us ammunition to fight the Archons, to push back against the machine, to go deeper, to uncover more. And as our thank you, paid members get access to a 1-hour live, personalized weekly group tarot reading, guidance, insight and clarity for the road ahead. But kicking a man for being down on the floor, that's something we cannot ignore. That's why starting today, you can steal the Astral Atom exclusive daily newsletter for free. No paywall, no catch. Just join the Patreon free tier, link in the description. This is the start of our conversation with you, and it's bi-directional. You can reply to any email we send you. We'll read it, we'll hear you, and we'll do our best to get an answer to you from the universe itself. If you can support, we need you. If you can't, take what's free. The Obsidian Inner Order is open. Now, let's get back to work. In the silence that followed their failed attempts to reclaim your attention, something profound began to take form within them. The emptiness they had spent a lifetime running from, filling with validation, admiration, and the emotional energy of others, finally caught up with them. And in that vacuum, the seeds of transformation found fertile ground. It began as discomfort, a persistent itch beneath the skin of their consciousness that no distraction could soothe. The questions you planted simply by walking away started to sprout, sending roots deep into their psyche. Why did your rejection hurt so much more than others? Why couldn't they simply move on to the next target, as they always had before? What made you different? Slowly, painfully, the truth emerged from the shadows. It wasn't about you at all. It was about what you reflected back to them. The emptiness, the manipulation, the fundamental dishonesty of their approach to human connection. For the first time, they saw themselves through eyes unclouded by need or attachment, and the image was devastating in its clarity. The patterns became impossible to ignore. The same manipulative tactics deployed with mechanical precision. The same superficial connections formed and discarded. The same emptiness awaiting them after each successful conquest. You hadn't just rejected them, you had rejected their entire mode of existence, deemed it unworthy of your energy, and in doing so forced them to question its worthiness altogether. Dark nights of the soul followed. Hours spent confronting memories they had carefully avoided, recognizing the pain they had caused, feeling, perhaps for the first time, genuine remorse, uncomplicated by self-interest. they began to see the trail of wounded souls they had left behind, not as tributes to their power, but as evidence of their brokenness. The false self began to crumble under the weight of this new awareness. The charismatic mask that had served them so well felt increasingly heavy to maintain. The scripts and tactics that once flowed effortlessly now felt foreign in their mouth, like speaking a language they had suddenly become ashamed of knowing. Without consciously choosing it, they began to change. They found themselves hesitating before the familiar lies, pausing before the manipulative texts, questioning the impulse to create false intimacy. They started detecting their own emptiness. Before attempting to fill it with someone else's energy, they began to recognize the difference between connection and conquest, and in quiet moments they found themselves thinking of you, not with the obsessive need to reclaim control, but with a strange, unfamiliar gratitude. You had done what no one else could, shown them the fundamental bankruptcy of their approach to relationships, forced them to confront the emptiness they had spent a lifetime running from, catalyzed an awakening they had never sought but desperately needed. There's a sacred truth you must understand about your impact on them. You have been permanently etched into their soul's memory. Not as a conquest, not as a target, not as another interchangeable face in their collection of admirers, but as the catalyst who fundamentally altered their life's trajectory. You exist in their mind now as a before and after marker. There is who they were before encountering your boundaries, and who they became after crashing against them. There is the life they lived before your rejection shattered their illusions, and the life they now navigate through the fragments. You are their personal BC and AD, the dividing line in their psychological chronology. They may try to convince themselves they've moved on. They may enter new relationships, attempt to deploy their old tactics, momentarily slip back into familiar patterns of emotional manipulation. But something has fundamentally changed. The scripts don't flow as smoothly anymore. The masks don't fit as comfortably. The emptiness doesn't feel as easily ignored, because now there is a voice within them, a voice that sounds suspiciously like yours, questioning each inauthentic move, calling out each manipulative tactic, demanding a level of honesty they're still learning to provide. Even if years pass without contact, even if they build a life seemingly disconnected from the lesson you taught them, your impact remains indelible. In moments of true self-reflection, they know with absolute certainty you were the one who broke the cycle. You were the one who refused to play the game on their terms. You were the one who walked away unscathed when everyone before you had, left wounded. Should they ever gather the courage to return, to attempt contact from a more authentic place, to express the gratitude they're slowly learning to feel, know this: your power remains absolute. Because you never needed their validation, their attention, their energy to feel complete. You were whole before them, whole during them, whole after them, and this wholeness was precisely what they couldn't manipulate, couldn't diminish, couldn't control. The cosmic irony is exquisite. They selected you because they thought you would be another easy conquest, another source of narcissistic supply, another temporary distraction from their inner emptiness. Instead, you became their greatest teacher, their most significant loss, and paradoxically, their most important gain. In attempting to break your heart, they found their own broken open instead, broken open to the possibility of genuine connection, authentic emotion, real intimacy, broken open to the very vulnerability they had spent a lifetime avoiding, broken open to the truth of who they are beneath the carefully constructed facade, and in that breaking open, painful, mesmerizing, transformative, they found the first authentic connection they ever experienced, the connection to their own truth, catalyzed by your refusal to accept anything less. You didn't just win the game they created, you changed the game entirely, and for that, they will never, ever forget you.